Blockchain Show is a podcast that demystifies cryptocurrencies and distributed ledger technology.
Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome back to the Blockchain Show. Thank you for joining us. You're listening to episode 160. Today, we got a special guest. We've got Reuben Yap. Reuben.
Hey.
How you doing? Welcome. Thank you for joining me.
Doing well. Glad to be on. Thanks, Ethan.
It's kind of unprecedented times. I'm grateful that we have the podcast to still stay in contact and talk to our fans around the world, and hopefully we can give them some good information today. You're here to talk about Zcoin and, privacy first digital currency. So topic's going to be a little bit about privacy and crypto, but before we really get into it, would you mind just telling us a little bit about yourself and how you got involved with crypto and blockchain?
Sure. Prior to actually joining the blockchain space, I was a lawyer for about 10 years. And sometime in 2007, I actually started a VPN company. So basically, we encrypt people's internet connections, right? So, and one of the things that kind of made me want to do this was because our government was actually kind of starting to censor internet connections. And I think it's very timely right now because it always starts with good intentions. Then it was about blocking, pornography and all this sort of unwanted stuff. And then it started overreaching into things like, political speech. And so sometime in about 2012, when I was already running this business for a while, they were saying, hey, you're running a privacy service, but I still have to pay using PayPal or other types of digital forms of payment. How can I pay you anonymously? Why don't you consider using Bitcoin? Of course, now we know Bitcoin isn't anonymous, but then it was still seen as a private way to pay people. And that's kind of how I went down the whole rabbit hole. So I started accepting Bitcoin in the end of 2012. And then I started being exposed to Monero, to Dash. And I guess in 2016, when Zcoin first launched, I had the opportunity to join the team. And being always very privacy focused, it just seemed like a great project to join.
That's great. It's good to hear that you've got a really good insight into, some issues that are pretty timely. Maybe if you wouldn't mind just telling us a little bit about what you're working on at Zcoin and what your role is and kind of like what your day-to-day looks like.
Sure. I mean, Zcoin is a privacy-first digital currency that enables untraceable transactions. And, we aim to provide financial freedom, especially from, prying eyes of large corporations, financial institutions, and oppressive governments. And currently right now, I mean, we do have, we've been running since 2016, but we are building our new privacy protocol called Lelantus, which allows people to destroy their coins and have them redeem them at any time in the future for brand new ones with no previous transaction history. And it has certain upgrades. You don't need to use fixed denominations, no fancy crypto, and it's pretty scalable as well. So that's what we've been working on. We hope to launch sometime in end of Q2. So that's the main thing. And the other thing that we've been working on a technical level is something called Elysium, which allows the creation of custom tokens on Zcoin's blockchain, and not unlike Ethereum ERC20, except that now that you can use privacy features as well, so that you can also burn and redeem coins with no previous transaction history as well. And it has a lot of potential use cases such as voting, or you just want to have a privacy coin on top of Zcoin. So we're pretty excited about that.
Yeah, that's great, man. I think that some of our listeners may not really understand quite yet. Cryptocurrency it's really not that anonymous like some people think. I think maybe when it first came out, it was kind of lauded as a more anonymous means to send money, but it's actually fairly traceable. So I was hoping you could speak a little bit to the merits of untraceable transactions, why that's important and how you guys are going about to achieve that.
Sure. I think that's a great question. When Satoshi first wrote the white paper, he even had a paragraph dedicated to privacy, and he recognized that yes, everything's transparent, but if you always create a new address, some element of privacy can be had. Now, of course, now we know that that isn't the case with advanced blockchain analysis techniques. I think before we go into that, we need to understand why are we pursuing privacy on the coin. And a lot of times, just imagine that, okay, if I have 100 Bitcoin in one address, and I go out and use it to pay someone, let's say, just say, hypothetically, a cup of coffee. I pay someone, 0.001 Bitcoin or so. Now, because of the way Bitcoin works, the movement of every single coin is permanently recorded on the blockchain. When the person receives that 0.001 Bitcoin, they immediately know now that I at least have 100 Bitcoin, because they can see that that money came from an address that at least has 100 Bitcoin. And if you look at it further, I can possibly see the sources of that information as well. Like, oh, maybe you've been paid monthly, or maybe you how you spend it before, or when you get paid. So it's almost as if like in a traditional banking system, we're at least kind of protected in the sense that our financial transactions are not public information. But with public blockchains, where anyone can access them, and although there isn't a name, attached to an address, people that do know your address, like for example, if I'm a merchant, or if I'm an exchange, or I just use social media to kind of tie real life identities to an address, suddenly it becomes like a crossword puzzle, and I have all this information of who you transacted with. So because it's a public blockchain, we do need privacy a lot more than, let's say, traditional systems. So, there have been many ways to kind of approach privacy, and a lot of, like, for example, in Bitcoin, you can kind of mix your transactions with other people's, and similar with Monero, or many other privacy systems, where it's all about kind of hiding your transaction in the crowd, so it is not clear, who was the originator of this transaction. The way that Zcoin approaches it, like I mentioned before, it was more about not just hiding in the crowd, but actually making it disappear and then reappear at a different place, completely. So that transaction link is not just hidden; it's also completely broken. So it's a different approach than, let's say, just hiding in the crowd. So I hope that gives a rough understanding of how privacy mechanism works on blockchain.
Yeah, that was very well said. Thank you for that. I wanted to talk about why privacy is a fundamental human right, something that is a little bit slippery right now. I mean, when we set this interview up, the coronavirus situation was just kind of unfolding, but now it's hit the United States, where most of our listeners are, and we're starting to see unprecedented things happening. Like, before we started recording, we were talking a little bit about using geolocation data to, I don't know if it's the CDC or who's doing it, to kind of track people to see if they're, I assume it'd be maintaining distance from people. I'm not sure how that works. I was wondering if you could speak to how, privacy, it's essential into preserving, democracy, personal freedom, and maybe if you could just kind of tie that into this whole situation that we're kind of witnessing now.
Sure. I mean, of course, there are many angles to why privacy is a human right, but maybe in the sort of context of coronavirus, it's more about the relationship between the citizen and the government. And obviously, in the past, before technology, we were kind of protected. Like, cash is relatively anonymous. The government did not know exactly where we were at every single point of time, which is now possible with the use of our cell phones. And it's about, especially in this era of big data and, with digital time technology, governments now have immense powers over the individual citizen. And if they know, where you spend your money, how much you earn, where everything is moving, they also know where you are. And if I became like a tyrannical kind of government, or a government that, is about quelling dissent, and not unlike China or other oppressive countries. If someone wants to kind of start like any sort of rebellion, like, I think one of the essential things about democracy is to be able to call out the government and say, look, this isn't right. I don't agree with this, the whole idea of freedom of speech. But if the government has full, oversight over what you do, how much you earn, where your money is, they can easily, lock you up because they know where you are. They can easily freeze all your funds and cut you off of the financial system because you know where all your money is and where exactly everyone is. And this is actually already kind of happening in China to a certain extent. So it's also about, and this is one of the really interesting things of how Germany is such an advanced country. I think it's one of the most advanced countries in Europe. And despite being so advanced and they have a really great banking system, they still hold cash really, really dear to them. They still want physical cash. And I think one of the biggest reasons is because they see the anonymous and the private properties of cash as an essential check and balance between the powers of the government and the powers of the citizen. And I guess that's how I kind of see it as well. And that's kind of why, we want to build like a private form of digital cash.
Yeah, I really like that. Just the whole concept of digital cash. I know in America we've had digitized dollars for quite some time. It's a weird shutdown right now in Los Angeles County. There's a few places that I've seen signs saying, we're not accepting cash right now, only like contactless payments. So like I went to In-N-Out hamburgers here, and they were only taking cards that you could put the chip in so that you wouldn't have to like touch anything other than your card. I don't know. I got this weird George Orwellian kind of thought of maybe this is the beginning of the end of cash. And, being such a crypto enthusiast, I like not using cash, but seeing it disappear so quickly, briefly, it made me think for a second, are we headed that way, or is there going to be cash? And if there is no longer going to be cash, do we want it to be in the controls of a central authority like a government? And so I do like the fact that there is a privacy first digital currency out there like Zcoin.
One of the things that is interesting to note is that, even if you do trust the government, even if you believe that they're doing the right thing, especially with digital payments, there are private companies as intermediaries in between. Like there's all this, like in Malaysia, we have things like called Boost, like digital payment apps, or like in China, you have like WeChat Pay. They have your data as well, and they aren't banks; they are technology companies. Well, okay, maybe WeChat now is applying for their own banking license, but for many of these like intermediaries that see all this data, you just kind of have to take them at their word that they are keeping your data safe as well. So I do think that, cash is just so simple. And in a way, we just want to make that kind of simplicity to digital payments as well, especially on the public ledger.
Yeah, very good. Kind of curious about any other privacy or crypto related trends and use cases that you guys might be looking into, or maybe that you're just interested about, such as, elections for one thing. They're talking about suspending elections in this country. I don't know if there's any truth to that, but there's been rumors. So can you speak to any other trends or use cases there?
Sure. So one of the things that Zcoin did back in like the end of 2018 is that we actually, our blockchain was actually used to run the Thai Democrat primary elections, basically to elect who should be the leader of the Thai Democrat Party. And that was a really interesting experience because it was a very unique case where none of the candidates trusted each other, and they also didn't trust their own Democrat Party election commission. So although they wanted, for the very first time in the history of the party, they would want to, usually it's just the top honchos deciding, okay, you become the leader of the Thai Democrat Party. But in this particular scenario, they wanted their actual Democrat Party members to directly elect the leader. And therefore, they needed a way to do this election, and they thought that e-voting would be a good way to get like participation for that. But halfway through the development of this sort of e-voting application, the candidates could not agree as to, hey, who's going to store the data? How do I know it's not going to be tampered with? And that's kind of how Zcoin's blockchain came to being. And basically, our blockchain was used basically to store all the votes or the links to all the votes. And of course, before it was placed on the blockchain, it was encrypted. So I think in that particular scenario, yes, it's a combination of blockchain and privacy technology that really, really was solving the issue right there and then, which was the lack of trust between candidates. So I think there was it was like 127,000 over people across Thailand that actually voted on this. And we think it's the largest scale blockchain election of any consequence held in this world ever.
Well, that's incredible, man. I didn't even know about that. Thanks for telling us about that. That's really awesome. There's been, evidence in other democracies across the country of, tampering, and nothing is quite what media outlets want us to think. Sometimes I wonder if America has, just as much propaganda as other countries from bygone eras sometimes. But anyways, just to kind of switch back to an earlier topic when you were talking about Lelantis, is that how you pronounce it?
Yep, correct.
So I really like that. Rather than just hiding coins, you're able to make them disappear completely. And I was hoping you could expand on that a little bit, because I think that's maybe a new topic. We've talked about burning coins. Is that similar or different?
Yeah, it's similar. I mean, right now we're currently using a protocol called Sigma, which is something called one out of many proofs. And the whole idea is that you send these coins to like a black hole, right? It kind of stops existing, kind of. And at any time in the future, you then take what we call a zero knowledge proof, or it's almost like a receipt that you did burn this coin. But the beauty of this receipt and why it's called a zero knowledge proof is that this proof only proves that you burnt the coins, but it does not show exactly which coins you burnt. So you post that, to the blockchain, and that allows you to redeem brand new coins that look as if like they've been freshly mined. So there's no previous transaction history associated with them. So that's kind of like how, on a very high level, it works. And right now, I mean, Sigma, the issue with that is that you kind of have to burn and redeem in fixed denominations, like $10 and then I redeem $10. I can't do a partial redemption. But Lelantis greatly really expands that further, because you can burn, like, let's say 10.32, and then I can redeem 0.5. So, it gives a lot more flexibility, and it prevents people from tying the redemptions to the burning. And one of the most exciting things for me personally, a bit of a geeky thing, is that on top of this, you can even, rather than being the one that redeem, like to redeem this annual points, I can pass the right to redeem to someone else. So that greatly, improves privacy, because I don't even have to burn. I can just pass it to someone else, and he can redeem it himself. So that's kind of how like Lelantis and like Sigma kind of work on a very high level.
That is very interesting. And I wonder if the technology that you are developing, do you think that, authoritarian governments or, oppressive regimes, do you think that they'll be able to limit their people's access to alternative blockchains, or is the nature of blockchain resistant to central authority, or are there still ways that governments can, make sure that their citizens are only using like, their own developed digital currencies?
I think this is a problem that's not just limited to, not just limited to privacy coins, but of course, we have often been painted as enabling criminal activity, which is really untrue. If you take a look at the analysis of most of like people doing CoinJoin or Bitcoin, most people just want to have privacy. They're not trying to hide any kind of illegal activity. And I guess the idea here is that yes, you can make your blockchain like hard for governments to shut down. Like with proof of work, we have thousands of nodes everywhere, and you have privacy technology on top of that. But governments can always cut down on regulated exchange, being able to accept them. The gateways into fiat. And that's something that governments will always have control over. So I don't think even with Bitcoin, we haven't really seen it being able to be used like cash. It's still just existing like an asset class. And nowadays, especially regulated exchanges, there's been kind of like a crackdown on privacy. Like for example, if you run your Bitcoin through a mixer and then you try to deposit it on an exchange, the exchange will then say, hey, I don't like this. Where's this source from? And let's take a look at it, right? And tell me where you got this money. And that's already happening right now. And I think the only way to kind of fight against that is to build more kind of resilient ways to do like P2P transactions. So maybe like stuff like DEXs, and especially if things like stable coins take off, where you can kind of have an indirect kind of route to building bridges between pure cryptocurrencies to stable coins. I think that would help. But definitely the government does have strong incentives and also, powers to actually make cryptocurrencies a lot harder to use. But I don't think they can kill it completely just because of the nature, the distributed nature and things like that. And you can always have anonymous developers as well.
Just to get a little bit off topic here, because I've been holed up in my house for like the last week. What's it like where you're at, and is your daily life impacted? Are you still able to work, or have you had to change how you conduct business?
So luckily, like most of Zcoin, we're all remotely working. So working from home isn't new. But what is new is that because of the, we have a movement restriction order. So we aren't allowed to go out of our houses unless we really need to, or we have like a special permission to. But particularly for me, because my wife is a doctor and she's actually like dealing with COVID patients, I've had to not be with her. So that's quite sad because she's living, I'm living alone now. I can't see anybody because I'm semi-exposed, but not exposed enough so that if I be with my wife, I'm more likely to get infected. So she's living alone. I'm living alone. I guess that's the biggest thing. And I haven't had human contact for a while. So this podcast helps.
Yeah, man. Well, I'm sorry to hear that. I'm sure that she's helping a lot of people, and that's a difficult situation. So hope that you guys are reunited very soon. I was thinking earlier about I don't know what to call it, like the surveillance state that's kind of emerging. I mean, I remember when Gmail came out, I thought it was the best thing ever. We get all these free suite of Google products. They're great. Everybody uses them. But in the background, they were just collecting all our data, monetizing it, making billions of dollars. I didn't realize I was really the product. And I'm kind of looking forward. We're seeing more and more smart things, the Internet of Things, smart furnaces, thermostats, refrigerators, meters. I mean, third parties are going to have unprecedented access to our data.
Right.
I'm curious if you guys have thought of any way to kind of combat that, to increase someone's privacy if they still wanted to participate in smart technology, or are we best to just kind of go back to the older way of things? I don't know. What do you think?
I actually think that because there hasn't been a demand for privacy, I think it's only come to the forefront very recently. Like, I think only just in the past year or so, we've started seeing Apple talking about championing privacy and like, oh yeah, we're a private privacy focused phone or something like that, which isn't really true, but at least it recognizes that there's a growing number of people that value privacy technology. So I think one of the things that you can have kind of like privacy is to, let's say, all this like prediction, like keyboard prediction, or this like smart machine learning type of technologies, instead of passing it to a central server that's run by Apple or Google. Computers now are kind of fast enough to kind of do it and store that information locally. And that means the information is just like stuck in your phone. It doesn't go out to anybody. So I think that's a good way that we can still achieve the convenience while maintaining our privacy. Especially with email, there's also like new technologies, like for example, like with Proton Mail, where you can have your email done in an end-to-end encrypted way, so that even Proton Mail can't even access the contents of those emails. And that's similar with like file storage. Like, unlike like you want an end-to-end encrypted version of Dropbox. There's a few options out there like pCloud, or you can use like an add-on such as Box Crypto or things like that. So the solutions are actually there. It's not impossible to protect your privacy. And similarly, I just was recently like playing around with a like a modified version of Android called Graphene OS, which just strips out all this Google stuff, and on top of that, like has other kind of privacy enhancements. And if you want to be private today, it's not easy, but you can definitely prevent the most the biggest breaches of your data, and but you just have to sacrifice some sort of convenience for it, right? Like, I'm not able to talk to my phone right now and like say like, oh, okay, Google, search that, and I'm okay with that, or because it's recording everything and learning from it, right? Which is kind of scary.
Yeah.
But the thing is that there are private ways to do this type of things, and without compromising individual privacy. And just a funny story, because you were talking about Internet of Things, and I've been really, being a privacy advocate, I'm quite careful about what I let into my home. So, and I was thinking, I'm not going to let any of this Internet of Things thing enter my home, unnecessarily, if I can do without it. And I kind of like, gave in a bit and agreed to a vacuum cleaner, right? And I was like, how can a vacuum cleaner break my privacy, right? I was like, it doesn't have a mic. It doesn't have like, what can it do? I think I can accept that until it sent me a report of its cleaning. And I was like looking at the report and I was like, crap, that's a floor plan of my house.
Oh, wow.
And it was uploading it to Samsung servers. And I was like, oh gosh, like, it's really hard to escape. And a lot of times you don't even know that your data is being leaked. And I think actually just in February, I think a couple of big telco companies in the US were actually caught directly sharing like location data to third parties without letting people know in their privacy policy. So that's pretty scary, even in this so-called day and age.
Yeah, totally. We have to just stay on top of it, I guess. And a lot of people who are early adopters to cryptocurrency are probably quite adept at researching these things, and they probably understand how they work. But I think it's probably the everyday person who may have more of a challenge staying on top of things because maybe they're just busy or their life is demanding. A lot of people turn to technology to make their lives easier, and they don't necessarily understand the background going on, like all these giant corporations mining their data, and they're kind of just like lulling them into contentment. But it's very creepy. So it's very refreshing speaking with you, Reuben, and just kind of like getting a little bit of a course correction. Hopefully some people listening are waking up a little bit further.
Yeah. one of the things that I think I would like to just quickly touch on is that one of the, I think, examples of regulation actually working in protecting privacy is the GDPR in the Europe, in Europe, right? Where, every user can demand their data to be deleted and stuff like that. And because Europe was such a big market, a lot of these companies were forced to adapt their systems to be privacy conscious. So I think that was a very good move. I mean, yes, it incurred a lot of cost of compliance, but I think it's ultimately worth it. And hopefully, US being the land of the free, has better privacy protection soon. Yeah.
I know we're kind of going past our time here, so I wanted to give you an opportunity just to give us some closing thoughts where we can go to learn more and potentially get involved with Zcoin.
Sure. So, if you want to find out more about Zcoin, you can just drop by our website, zcoin.io. We have a very active Twitter account at Zcoin Official. We have really, active Telegram groups you just go to our website and click on community and see all of that. And I think one of the things that, I would really like, it sounds a bit naive, and is that, the original purpose of cryptocurrencies was, to be money that was free from control, free from, censorship resistant, and had a certain, degree of privacy. But, right now the focus is always on the Bitcoin price, the derivatives, how much I can gamble on it. And hopefully this is just a phase, but I really want people to be involved in the project. You don't even have to invest or put money into it, but at least recognize the importance of, self-sovereign digital currencies that have privacy in this space where governments are just getting more and more powerful and democracy is becoming more and more of a joke. And I see financial privacy as a very important component in preserving our freedoms, and hopefully more and more people recognize that. And that's all I guess I have to say on that. Yeah.
Awesome, man. Well, this has been a really good chat, Reuben. I just want to thank you again. I really enjoyed talking to you. Please come back again sometime when you'd like to. Hope you stay safe out there. And, thanks again.
Thanks a lot, Ethan. Take care.